Hi everyone and welcome to my channel FourEyedMonster Miniatures, where you will find either work in progress updates on my custom painted scale projects or straight out of the box reviews of collectible pre-painted figures. Today we'll continue with the budget-friendly TAITO Aqua Float Girls lower tier crane price figures that revolve around an aquatic theme, and their take on characters from the Saekano How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend light novel, manga and anime series, specifically on Kasumigaoka Utaha this time around. Utaha is the second of 3 Saekano characters in the TAITO Aqua Float Girls series that I'll be unboxing and reviewing on my channel, and one that I'm most looking forward to. As with all harem animes, Saekano has a group of girls all seemingly vying for the lead male character's affection, who in this case is Aki Tomoya. Of the 3 main female love interests in Saekano, I found Utaha's yandere tendencies to be the most interesting personality-wise, versus Ariri Spencer's more tsundere behavior and Kato Megumi's boring, almost non-personality. That's the reason for my anticipation of the Utaha Aqua Float Girls version. The box art maintains the aquatic theme as seen previously with Megumi, with Utaha in a 2-piece swimsuit posing against a backdrop of the beach side. Here she is seated atop her swim ring, sans the blue base. Other sides showcase the figurine superimposed against the Aqua Float Girls logo and also against an image of the ocean at dusk. An exception is the last image, whereby she is posed against an open book, which is a reference to Utaha being a published novelist despite still being in high school. Let's now proceed to the unboxing ASMR for the TAITO Aqua Float Girls crane price figure of Kasumigaoka Utaha, which you can of course skip if you so wish and check out the close-up or once-over session using the timestamps I've provided. In keeping with traits of the Aqua Float Girls series, the TAITO crane price figure comes in 3 separate parts, namely the clear blue base, swim ring, and complete Utaha figurine. While like Megumi before her, Utaha also has skin tone that seems largely flat sans any deliberate shading paintwork. The latter's more voluptuous body and relatively more complex pose, such as the crossing of her legs, gives rise to subtle natural shadows that I suspect arise due to the skin tone paintwork not reaching the nooks and crannies of her scalp, thus leaving the original dark pinks of either the base coat or molded in plastic colour untouched. And as you can see, her nails in general remain unpainted. Utaha is clad in a simple 2-piece swimsuit, with her right hand holding on to a pair of red sunglasses, while her left hand is holding on to her hair at the back of her head. I like the scalp complexity that sees Utaha's left underarm being stylistically covered from view by a thick lock of hair, which unlike her skin tone has variation in colour tonality. The highlights on the ends of her long hair are the results of a lighter application of what looks like very dark purple on hair sculpted from clear plastic. And as with the Aqua Float Girls version of Megumi, this TAITO take on Utaha shares a high lightness factor to her 2D form. Next, we have a display stand that's identical to Megumi's base. That is, it's sculpted to look like a swirling mass of water. And this clear blue base, in turn, supports a swim ring whose top half is in a similar light pink color, but now with purple letterings denoting the company name Blessing Software, versus black in Megumi's case. Another difference lies in the flotation device's bottom half, which is in red for Utaha versus salmon pink for Megumi. Assembly for this TAITO Aqua Float Girls pre-painted figure is actually more of a stacking process that requires these three separate parts to be placed on top of each other, one after another. Starting with the swim ring on top of the blue base, which has three elongated sculpted waveforms acting as support structures holding up the flotation device. This is then followed by the figurine that's seated on top of the swim ring. Of course, I'm showing you this last step of Megumi being placed on the swim ring, sans the blue support base, just because it's easier to manipulate the parts to show you the stacking process. When stacking all three parts together in normal off-camera conditions, when there's no need to angle the parts towards the camera for YouTube viewers, it's always better to carry out the stacking process on a flat surface like the work table here. Moreover, it's best to view this figurine set from a frontal or slightly top-down view when it's on a flat surface, as we are going to do now in the full 360-degree view section. In terms of size, this pre-painted figure of Kasumigaoka Utaha differs slightly from Kato Megumi, both in terms of vertical height of the entire vignette of figurine plus swim ring plus blue base, as well as the dimensions of the figurine itself. Because Utaha is depicted as being taller than Megumi in the Saekano series, i.e. 169 cm versus 160 cm in real-life height measurements, therefore the length of the Utaha figurine is roughly 1 cm longer than Megumi when measured in a straight line from her toes to the back of her head, for a total of about 13.5 cm. However, due to Utaha's pose, which sees her lying back in a more relaxed manner, her entire vignette's vertical height is perceptibly lower despite a less than 30mm difference. Already based on an extremely simple premise of relaxing on a pool or seaside, I wasn't expecting the Utaha figure's posture to be groundbreaking, much like how Megumi's pose was not. Yet when comparing the two, I found Utaha's pose to be more dynamic in creating a sense of movement in one's eye view, for example in the flow of her sculpted hair as well as S-shapes generated, although the latter is helped partly by Utaha's more shapely body. As for the overall color scheme, the flat blacks of her bikini and flat reds of the swim ring's bottom half are both boring and visually uninteresting. That leaves Utaha's hair and skin tone to inject some color excitement into a figurine series that has a relatively limited color palette in general. Now I've touched on Utaha's hair and skin tone paintwork in detail earlier, so I'll just quickly recap the key points that made it a slightly better paintwork than that found on Megumi, which are that her longer and more voluminous hair allowed for prominent highlights at the ends of her hair, while her voluptuous curves and more dynamic pose resulted in natural shadows that were subtle yet perceivable through a casual glance. Overall, the Utaha figurine does not really inspire color-wise, but the paintwork does enough for a budget-tier figure that cannot justify the extensive skin tone shading needed to make a scantily clad model stand out. Without a doubt, this TAITO Aqua Float Girls pre-painted figure product line definitely fills a niche in the figure collecting market, especially among enthusiasts who are on a budget. These TAITO crane price figures offer swimwear themed characters on a more affordable price spectrum. This is because most pre-painted scale figures clad in swimwear that actually look decent tend to sell at a more premium price, ostensibly due to the paintwork effort needed to achieve aesthetically pleasing skin tone shadows and highlights, increasing production costs. Of course, there are other budget tier swimwear clad figures, but most have flat skin tones. What Aqua Float Girl Utaha brings to the table is a compromise of sorts, whereby a more dynamic form factor, namely her pose, helps mitigate what is generally still a largely flat skin tone hue. Now, bearing in mind the minimalistic simplicity of a pre-painted figure clad in swimwear, I found myself liking this Utaha version immensely due to what I perceive as a more dynamic pose and sculpt. But in the interest of full disclosure, you should also be aware of my personal stake in this character, seeing that Saekano is after all a harem anime, and Kasumigaoka Utaha just so happens to be my favorite girl in the said romantic comedy. Bearing that in mind, as well as the positive attributes I have discussed earlier, I'm giving this TAITO Aqua Float Girls version of Utaha a diamond rating or an A rank. While this rating can be construed as a tad controversial, seeing that it's only a budget tier crane price figure, I believe the aquatic swimwear and swim ring theme that the TAITO series brings to the market is unique enough and well executed enough to warrant this rating. One should never underestimate the value that a budget piece can bring to a collector in bridging the formidable gap between premium figure quality and budget figure pricing. And if an offering succeeds in doing this relatively well, then I believe it deserves an A rank, with the caveat, of course, that if pricing was equal, then of course the premium figure would be the better figure, period. Well, that's my take on the TAITO Aqua Float Girls version of Kasumigaoka Utaha from the Saekano How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend anime series. I hope you have enjoyed my unboxing and review of Utaha. If you did, I would appreciate it if you help me out by hitting the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell for future content. Until next we meet, stay safe, be well, and be happy. Bye for now.